If there's any side that India is on in the Russia-Ukraine crisis, it is on the side of peace. This was the statement from India's foreign minister in parliament today. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. We're continuing to debate whether the horror that we have seen emerge out of Ukraine with mass graves and bodies littered in the streets of Bucha will be a tipping point in this war. India has finally reacted with the strongest words ever, calling for an independent probe into these civilian killings. But it is not likely that India will change or shift its position more dramatically than it has. Speaking in Parliament, India's foreign minister is saying that India is on the side of peace and is against bloodshed. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian president is saying that the United Nations has failed and is saying that what Russia is doing in Ukraine is no difference from the ISIS. On the program today, we continue to ask whether India has handled this deftly or whether we are making a fatal mistake, one that will place us on the wrong side of history. Joining us on the program, Tavleen Singh, veteran journalist who has long been arguing for a more categorical condemnation and intervention from the Indian side, joins us. From Ukraine today, Vivek, pleased to have with us Oleksandra Matviichuk. She's from the Center for Civil Liberties. Welcome to the program, ma'am. We're joined by veteran diplomat, Ambassador Vivek Katju, and also joining us is strategic affairs analyst, former general officer commanding of the 15th Corps, General Hasnain. May I start with our guest from Ukraine today, Oleksandra? I would like you to share with our audiences in India what you have documented at the Center for Civil Liberties in terms of how the civilians have been targeted. Your president going in front of the United Nations Security Council saying this is no different from the ISIS.
When this new Russian invasion started, we restored our initiative Euromaidan SOS. And we brought up several hundreds of volunteers in order to document war crimes throughout the country. It's ordinary people, that's why we are mostly focused on testimonies from victims and witnesses of war crimes. And we now can clearly state that according to systematic and large-scale character of these war crimes, Russia used war crimes as a method of warfare. That's why we have such enormous losses among civilians and so much pain among ordinary people. We documented how Russian troops deliberately shelling on schools, kindergartens, residential buildings, hospitals, medical personnel. We documented how Russian troops deliberately attack humanitarian corridors when ordinary people, families with their children try to evacuate from the destroyed by Russian troops cities. We documented hundreds of requests of help from Gostomel, from Mariupol, from other cities where people for weeks sit in basement without food, water, electricity, medical care. And Russia Federation isolated the cities deliberately in order to stop local resistance and don't provide any possibility to reach humanitarian assistance to these cities. So it's a real disaster. And frankly speaking, I have been documented war crimes 8 years already, but I have never been prepared for such amount of crimes. It's horrible and it has to be stopped immediately.
And how do you feel about how the world is reacting? Because even parts of the West that are condemning Putin are not really militarily doing much more.
We're very grateful for the solidarity which we feel around the globe, but it's not enough. The words can't stop Putin. And the problem is that it's not a war between Russia and Ukraine. It's a civilization battle between authoritarianism and democracy. And if we will not be able to stop Putin in Ukraine, it will be only a matter of time which next country will be a target. That's why we ask from democracies around the globe to make proactive state and stand with Ukraine and stop Putin. What has to be done? We urgently need weapons. We need air defense system, fighter jets, tanks. You can see from this picture, which you now see on your screen, that Russian troops killing unarmed. So we need arms in order to protect Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian cities. And second, we need such kind of economical sanctions which can stop the ability of Russian economy to feed this war. Because when we go into details for the imposed for current moment sanctions, we will see, for example, that only several Russian banks are banned from SWIFT. Among these several, there is no Sberbank, which is the biggest bank of Russia. And these half-hearted sanctions provide a possibility for Russian economy to recover and to continue to support this armed aggression. So we need from democracies to be honest to the declared values which they proclaimed and to stand with us in this dramatic time.
And my heart goes out to what you and the Ukrainian people are going through. You call upon democracies around the world. Well, we're the world's largest, and we have had to walk a tightrope that has caused a huge amount of debate at home and abroad. Before I open this up for the rest of our panel of experts, let's listen to what the Indian foreign minister said in Parliament on why India has taken the approach that we have.
Specific issues that were brought up by honorable members yesterday. What is India advocating in Ukraine? We are, first and foremost, strongly against the conflict. We believe that no solution can be arrived at by shedding blood and at the cost of innocent lives. In this day and age, dialogue and diplomacy are the right answers to any disputes, and this should bear in mind that the contemporary global order has been built on the UN Charter, on respect for international law, and for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states. If India has chosen a side, it is the side of peace, and it is for an immediate end to violence. This is our principal stand, and it has consistently guided our position in international forums and debates, including in the United Nations. Sir, many honorable members brought up the incident, the happenings in Bucha, and I want to say that we are deeply disturbed by the reports. We strongly condemn the killings which have taken place there. This is an extremely serious matter, and we support the call for an independent investigation.
Which echoes what India said at the United Nations as well. Ambassador Katju, you've been talking about how the Indian position has been evolving. It has certainly evolved to the degree of condemning the civilian killings. We just heard Oleksandra detail at chilling length what's happening on the ground. Do you believe that we can say we are on the side of peace? What does it amount to at the end of the day?
Look, I have felt right from February 24th that whatever may have been the provocations, Russia was completely unjustified in launching this invasion. Of that, at least as far as I'm concerned, there can be no doubt. But military conflict is always a sad and bloody affair. And statements like we are on the side of peace are important because they reflect a certain position. But at the end of the day, such statements are motherhood and apple pie. All countries are governed, Barkha, by their own interests. That is the unfortunate fact of global and international life. All countries. When conflicts are framed in the binary of democracies and autocracies, I'm reminded that the democracies have been in strong alignment with the most naked dictatorships, including in our region. Let us take the case of Ukraine. I'm saying this with no happiness. But for 25 years, Ukraine has been one of the important suppliers of military arms and ammunition to Pakistan when Pakistan was deeply involved in terrorism against us in India. That is a fact which can't be denied. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I have started by saying that Putin has to be condemned. But states don't condemn other states with whom there are deep interests involved. I don't blame the Ukrainians for supplying the Pakistanis with military hardware when they were engaged in terrorist activities against India. They were acting following their own interests. So, I, for one, try to look at these things diplomatically. And yes, if war crimes or alleged war crimes have been committed, then naturally should be investigated. The question always in international life is who will be an independent investigator? That is a very, very difficult question when there are emotions and passions that have been roused. So, to find an independent investigator to look at all this is very difficult. That doesn't
And,
mean
and,
that
and,
one
and in
should
any
be
case,
wrong.
sir, that takes very long. Do you believe we're at a tipping point in the conflict, or do you believe that there's going to be a long, drawn out conflict and it's going to carry on like this, with, in the end, ordinary people paying the price for it?
Unfortunately, all human history has shown that in conflict, even today, it is the ordinary people who pay a price. This is a European conflict. It has implications for the world. But let us not forget that over the last 70 years, these powers, these great powers who are taking such passionate positions, such principled positions, have themselves been involved in bloody conflict in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, in South America. These are historical facts. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to end this conflict as soon as possible. Of course, we should. But I'm trying to take a certain perspective here and not being governed by emotion.
Okay. Tavleen, you have been extremely emotional about India's lack of rage, as it were, about what Putin is doing. India's diplomats would argue that we have A, always been multipolar, B, what have the Americans done for us, C, Iraq. Afghanistan. The Americans have often been aggressors. The Americans have often done business with dictators and autocracies. Saudi Arabia won't take Biden's call today, but that was not always the case. After what we've seen and what Oleksandra has detailed, what would you say?
I actually object to the word conflict in this case. Russia invaded a democratic country, and it invaded that country because it hated the idea of it being democratic. Now, if I was Ukrainian and my choice was to try and live, in a Western style democracy or to be under the jackboot of Putin, I would choose to fight like the Ukrainians are fighting. And I have no compunction in saying that. And also, I have no compunction in saying that a lot of our bureaucrats, sorry, Ambassador Saab, I don't mean you particularly, but there is a generation of Indians that believes that this is just the continuation of something. No, this is war crimes being committed on live television across the world. We have not seen this before. If we had seen this in Iraq or even in Syria, we would have reacted with more morality than we have so far. India is not an amoral country. If we had reacted with a little bit more emotion, then we could have played the role of, if Putin is such a good friend of ours, then why is our prime minister not out there saying, please, Mr. Putin, you have to stop. What you're doing is evil. Why isn't he doing that? Just
When
saying we're on the side of peace. What does that
Yeah.
even mean? What does that mean? Why are we not playing some role, at least in the world? Are we going to, do we expect that if tomorrow China goes a little bit further in Ladakh or starts to claim, Arunachal Pradesh, as it often does, would we not want the world's support to say this is wrong? There are boundaries, there are, borders, and you cannot do what Putin is doing. I mean, why do we not have the moral sense, the morality to say that?
General Hasnain, what happens to morality in, I won't say conflict, in war? I will use the word war. It is war. It is a Russian invasion. I think we're all in agreement on that. Uh, but but what happens to morality both in war as well as
Uh,
Ambassador
uh,
Kaju reminds us, every country looking out for themselves?
Barkha, may I just say one
Yes,
word, if you permit?
yes,
I have
yes.
no reluctance in using the word invasion.
Okay.
Tavleen ji, it was an invasion. It was completely unjustified. When I use the word conflict, it includes invasion.
It's a
Okay.
different
Uh,
word.
okay. Okay. But let's say we agree that this is an invasion. At least on this panel, we agree. General Hasnain, now go ahead.
Right. Milka, thank you, first of all, for having me on this very, very important program that you are having today. And going by whatever has been spoken so far by my fellow panelists, it just shows that there is no black and white. There is a deep gray zone which exists here. Uh, As to the aspect of morality. In morality in war, no one can guarantee morality in war because war itself is immoral. I always believe war is immoral. My profession, in many ways, is considered to be immoral, I would say, to an extent, because you are actually coming into conflict, into war against each other. You are involved in killing each other, etc. But having said that, this is what humankind has been through for centuries and ages. But having said that, it's important to remember that how did this whole thing happen? What has been happening in Ukraine in the last couple of days is that the Russians have been frustrated. They have not been able to make headway. They have not been able to achieve their objectives. And as a result, there is utter frustration in the frontline troops, in the ranks. And this is invariably what happens in such standoffs, wars, conflicts, whatever you want to call it. And this is not going to end very quickly. You are seeing this, that without achievement of their objectives, the Russians are now withdrawing in certain areas. Kyiv, for example, the Ukrainians are claiming that they have recaptured almost the entire Kyiv. In frustration, troops which withdraw do all kinds of things. I'm not saying the Russians have done it because we have no proof to so far. And no one can really prove it. As to whether it's happened in the past or not, leave other areas. It's happened in Europe, right there in Serbia. It's happened in Bosnia-Herzegovina just about 20 years ago. This whole thing is being repeated. And yes, there is no one to investigate this. So we are deeply in the zone of gray at the moment as far as India is concerned. We are tiptoeing. And this is typical. I'm sorry to use a term like that. It's not a diplomatic term. We are tiptoeing around the situation, which is what is the best option for us at the moment. Because the situation is so dynamic that cannot be expected to take sides. I entirely agree with Mr. Katju. Diplomatically, from a strategic angle, our interests are prime for us. And that is what we have to look at. We fully empathize and sympathize with the loss of lives, the manner in which this whole war has panned out in Ukraine. The Ukrainians have been marvelously brave and strong, but unfortunate that our interests are such that at the moment, things may change in the next 20 days. But at the moment, we have to follow the course which our government is following. As an army man, I strongly continue to support that. But let me also say one small thing in the end. This is one of the strange conflicts in which you find the people of India, the media of India, and the government of India are on different sides. Completely different. If you see, the views and perceptions are absolutely different. The government of India is trying to protect our strategic interests. The media and the people are generally following their hearts, and which is what normally happens in wars of this kind. If you are people who honor and respect the rights of people.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction that you're making, because I know at the level of sentimentalism, certainly there's no ambiguity in India on among the people on whose side they're on. Oleksandra, you wanted to come in, please do go ahead.
I'm not a politician. I'm not a diplomat. I'm a human rights lawyer, and that's why I will allow myself to make two short remarks. First, I think that is a huge mistake to think that the war provides excuse for such things as killing unarmed people, rape women, killing pregnant women, and to provide enforced disappearances and terror against civilian population, which we observe in Kyiv region, which under Russian occupation, and now we receive requests for help from other regions where Russian troops are. Because first of all, we are all human beings, and regardless of the sides, such things is unacceptable. And even war have to be in line in international humanitarian law. And second, there are a lot of things which have no limitation in national borders. Like, it's very understandable for each person, regardless of citizenship, what is a pain is. Among the such things is democracy, is freedom. And that's why we ask Indian people to stand with Ukraine, to help us, because now we are at the forefront of the battle of the values of free world, at the battle for democratic future. And Russia started this invasion only because they want to stop us on the way of democratic transformation. The final comment, we live in a very interconnected world, and the only idea of freedom and the freedom of this idea makes this world safer. And India, who has China as a neighbor, can very understand this point. Thank you.
Ambassador Katju, I mean, I can't think of a single word that I actually disagree with in what Oleksandra has just said. There is a code of war. It is often flouted, but there is a code to war. General Hasnain knows there's a soldier's code. There is China looming large. If Putin gets away with this, it's a precedent for China. To that extent, when we say this is not our war, it has consequences for us.
Of course, all war has consequences. Of course,
no,
there is China.
For us in India, for us in India, it has consequences.
Barkha, at the end of the day, I believe that India will have to stand up to China and defend its interests vis-a-vis China by itself. No one will come to our aid. No one will come to our assistance. Let's be clear on that. It is our own strength, the will of our people, that we will have to defend our interests vis-a-vis China or vis-a-vis any other power. I'm reminded, some of us have memories, I'm reminded of the fact that terrorism is also an invasion of a kind. It is an invasion on the lives of ordinary people. How many Indians, civilians, mothers, children, wives, daughters have been lost to terrorism from Pakistan? That's also invasion.
It
how
is.
Many times?
26/11 was an act of war. I mean, there is no ambiguity about it.
Yes, absolutely. Did anyone really change their stance towards Pakistan? Did Ukraine stop its defense relationship with Pakistan? I don't blame them. All that I'm saying is I respect our Ukrainian colleague on this panel. I feel the pain. But equally, I expect that people in Europe, human rights activists in Europe, feel our pain too. I've never heard of this from any Ukrainian. That what was happening in J&K. I'm not even sure if they're aware of this. That is why it is the Western media, the full glare, and our own media, which is right, which should happen. But that is giving us this a perspective. Now, I know that people will say that two wrongs don't make a right. Of course they don't. But then the fact is that I do expect that human rights activists, when they depict their pain and say that this should be condemned, they should also condemn the kind of terrorism that India has faced for 3 decades. And I don't hear a word of it.
Okay, can I just get a brief interjection from Oleksandra and then Tavleen and then General Hasnain? Go ahead, Oleksandra, briefly, please.
I feel your pain, but I just want to stress that now we are dying. We are dying in this moment, in the current moment. And I think that we can discussed about responsibility of our politicians, your politicians, in previous time, later, when we have a time for such discussion. Now we are dying, and we are asking for the Indian democracies to stand with us and to help us to survive. Because if we will not stop Putin in Ukraine, you have no opportunity to blame Ukrainian people because Putin killed all Ukrainian people.
No, my friend, there are terrorist attacks taking place in Kashmir and people are dying there too. Not in the same number, but they are dying.
But I think the point being made here, Ambassador, is that there are arguments to be had that can be had over a period of time, but there is an existential threat to the Ukrainian people. Tavleen, go ahead with your response.
You know, I am really disappointed to hear the ambassador say what he did just now. In 2611, we were helped by the Americans. The West stood by us. They condemned it. If it hadn't been for the Americans, we would not have been able to unravel that plot. Please remember that. Those, you know, I mean, if we hadn't had the help of, you know, the CIA helping us, you know, find out what had happened, we would, you know, you could say what you just did, but that's not true. And secondly, a lot of the Western countries have opposed the Pakistanis' role in what they've been doing here. What about the FATF? Do you know, I mean, please, let's not be so whiny, you know. It is in India's national interest at the moment to stand up for what is right and to condemn as strongly as possible what is wrong and offer to mediate to stop Putin, who actually should be, you know, tried for war crimes. Because as has been pointed out by everyone, even if you call this a war in which two people are in conflict, which it isn't, it was an invasion. But even then, the rules of war have not been, you know, applied at all.
Okay, General Hasnain. Yeah, sorry, got that. General Hasnain, you believe there's a gray zone. Oleksandra and Tavleen Singh believe that this is extremely a set of black and white choices. There's a principle, there's also India's own interest. And if nothing else, India should be in mediatory position.
See, Barkha, this is an eternal debate. It's not the first time such a debate is taking place. This is an eternal debate. Whenever such war crimes occur in the world, it's very difficult to determine whether they are war crimes, first of all, at all. We may believe they are. There are a set of people who believe they are not. Right? So it's very difficult to take positions and to take sides in such wars, in such situations. I am totally with what Tavleenji is saying. I'm totally with our friend from Ukraine. The situation is pathetic, absolutely, in Kyiv and north of Kyiv, in the area of Bucha and places like that, is absolutely pathetic. But having said that, I think India is taking not a principled stand, but is taking a strategic stand on this whole issue. And there are many nations who are also doing something similar. We are changing, however. You can see that our stance is not a black and white stance. We are not saying this is right and this is wrong. We are saying that the Russians need to pull back. We are saying that there's a requirement for peace, that there should be negotiation and diplomacy. All the right terminologies are being used. We are not trying to be amoral by trying to preach to people to say that what is happening is right. We are saying it is wrong, but not in so many words. And the world understands, the world of diplomacy understands it best, because we cannot overnight change our stance of our linkages with Russia. Our interests are so deeply linked there. I'll draw Tavleen Singh Ji's attention to Jammu and Kashmir. There are huge allegations and violations of human rights from time to time which take place there against the Indian Army, for example. And I always take the stance that in such situations, again, there is no black and white. There is no absolutism in this kind of a thing. There will be fingers which will be pointed from time to time. Allegations will be made. But this is what war, this is what conflict, this is what insurgencies and militancies bring with them, unfortunately.
Okay.
That we can put an end to it.
Tavleen, briefly, and then I have to take closing comments from the ambassador and an Oleksandra. Tavleen, go ahead.
Yeah, I am horrified. I have great respect for you, General Saab, but you're saying that there are some doubts about whether war crimes have been committed. Are you sharing the Russian propaganda that the Ukrainians are staging these acts, that these are actors? How can you doubt it?
No, 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 no.
No, no, no.
Where
You
does this
just
come from?
did.
No, no.
You said
I
there
think
are
you
doubts.
misunderstood this whole thing.
There are
I am
doubts
saying very
about whether
clearly,
war crimes
I
have been
condemn it. I condemn every single
You're
act
saying
which
there
is
are
taking place.
doubts
I
about
think
whether
I think what I understand the general to be saying, Tavleen, is that the moment there is a military conflict, and I'm using that word carefully right now because we are in agreement that this was an act of Russian aggression. I think he's asking who will be the arbiter when India calls for an international probe. Who is going to be the arbiter of exactly what happened? When is this arbitration going to be done? What will happen in that this adjudication is almost an impossibility. I think that's in a sense, General Hassan. If you want to speak for yourself,
Exactly.
one
No.
sentence, and then I want to
You
move
you
on.
you said that you've said all the right things, because I continue to believe very strongly that whatever has happened there has been immoral completely, has been completely wrong. If the Russians are involved, and they are involved to a great extent, I believe that they are involved. I condemn it. But I also
Okay.
know that the means of proving this is almost impossible.
Okay, let me bring in Ambassador Katju briefly, and I'll give Oleksandra the last word then. Ambassador Katju, the Indian position is evolving. Is it evolving swiftly enough? There is a vote that's going to take place at the UN where Zelensky is essentially saying the UN has proved to be just irrelevant. It has not been able to stop Putin.
It's been irrelevant for the last 70 years in cases of invasion. That is the nature of the UN. So Mr. President Zelensky is not saying anything new. But my point is that this is of course wrong. If a war crime has been committed, and it does seem a war crime has been committed, there has to be an investigation, and whoever is responsible must pay a price. But then in the real world, the International Criminal Court has its limitations. This is the fact. There are major states who are not parties to the International Criminal Court. So when we talk that there is a war crime, it's all right that if there's someone from Africa, you pull him out because the country is weak and you arraign him before the court. But if there is, Iraq was invaded by the Americans,
Yeah.
and the Brits, on the ground that it had chemical weapons, and then it was proved there were no chemical weapons. Unless my memory is failing me, there were no chemical weapons. That was the premise. Thousands of Iraqis died in bombings. How do we characterize that? It's a question
As
that
a
I'm raising.
as an invasion, America
No,
invaded Iraq.
and
Bases fabricated evidence of weapons of mass destruction that did
now
not exist.
I've had some experience of Afghanistan. On the basis of wrong intelligence, marriage parties were attacked, children and
Yeah,
women were
true.
killed. What was that?
Okay,
Now,
let's.
no, just let me complete, please, because this is very important. So I don't want to be misunderstood. All that I'm saying is this is a horrible situation. It must end. I think what India is asking for is absolutely right. It must end. But what I'm adding is that we live in the real world. Unfortunately, I would like to take moral positions, but I don't see the world as it ought to be. I see it as it is.
Okay. Let's give the last word to Oleksandra. Go ahead, ma'am.
We live in a real world, but first of all, we are human beings. And now the situation is a test for all of us, for whom we are. And when I heard Ambassador, I have an impression that he said and tried to said that all these innocent men, women, and children which were killed by Russian soldiers are deserved for such destiny, because in past time Ukrainian politicians do something wrong.
I don't want
it's
you
not
to.
true.
I think that is wrong. You're putting
He's
words in
not
my
saying
mouth.
that.
No,
He's
I've
he's
not
not
said
saying
that.
that.
I
All
can
that I have said
with
is
her.
all that I have
word.
said is that I
And
expected.
may I finished?
Okay, I just want to intervene as the moderator to say, ma'am, that he did not say that, but he did talk about state responses, how state responses are guided by realpolitik, by a country's own interests. He prefaced it by saying what's happened to the Ukrainian people is terrible, abhorrent, and must be stopped. So I just want to say that, and let's, yeah, go ahead.
And what why I am so afraid to Indian people to interpret such ambassador's word, because for me, as a human rights defender for current moment, it's not a question how properly documented these war crimes which Russians committed in Ukraine, but for me as a human rights defender and as a human being, it's very important how to stop these war crimes for current moment, what I can do in order to prevent new victims of war crimes to emerge. And I know for sure that we couldn't do it without support of Indians people. And that's why I ask of India to stand with Ukraine and to help us to protect our democratic choice in order to have a positive transformation in the whole region. Because we live in a very interconnected world, and first of all, we are all human beings. Thank you.
Okay. Ambassador Katju, do you want a sentence there before I close?
Yes, of course. I think I was completely misunderstood. I'm sorry. I have not said at all that what is happening in Ukraine can be justified in any way. I started by saying that this is an invasion which cannot be justified in any way. And worse, if there are war crimes, it's worse. And obviously, it's being documented. But all that I'm trying to say is that we must apply equal standards. If to conflicts, invasions, human tragedies, all over the world, equal standards have to be applied in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in South America. That great powers act in certain ways. If it is happening in Europe, it elicits one kind of response. If it happens elsewhere, my last word, we saw the most blatant examples of racism coming up initially. When journalists from America and Europe started saying, but how can this happen here? These are people like us. These are white people like us. Ukrainian officials have said this. It's on record. They say, there were allegations against some Ukrainian units, and a Ukrainian official said, we are a European army. We don't behave like this. As if European armies are different from other armies of Asia and Africa. It has happened. Madam, please have a look at the evidence. So please, all that I want is equal treatment to all invasions and all human tragedies. Am I asking something wrong?
I can just see that this triggers, as General Hasnain, I think, pointed out, a kind of visceral response among, obviously, the Ukrainian people, and within India, a sharply polarizing impact on our conversation. We saw shades of that in this program today, but we will have to close right now. I kind of feel that India's position cannot remain static. We have reached some sort of tipping point in this war. I don't know what will come next, but the shift is evident. And I know there are people like Tavleen who wanted to be much more categorical and much more direct, but leaving it there for now. General Hasnain, Ambassador Katju, Oleksandra, Tavleen, thank you so much. And to our audience, see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.